My favorite author is Friedrich Nietzsche. My favorite book is Thus Spake Zarathustra. Well, that and Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. Naked Lunch is so beautifully insane and probably the most hilarious, twisted, witty thing ever written. I'm planning on conducting readings from Naked Lunch in the future, but for now, some Nietzsche. Thus Spake Zarathustra is my Bible, the book I have read more than any other, and a book that has helped me greatly in its ethos of promoting joy and acceptance of what is in the face of the endless difficulty and stupidity that unfortunately exists on planet Earth. It is almost a surrealist manual on how to live, and is something I have always found encouraging and uplifting, even on my darkest of days. Thus Spake Zarathustra is written with the ancient sage Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster, as protagonist, and its style images gospel. The book is written in a rhythmic prose of mythos which speaks indirectly through subtext, symbol, and parable. It is heavy on the figures, metaphor, and wordplay, and is one of the most beautifully poetic texts ever written. So rich in delicious tropes which make it so distinct, but at the same time subtle in its viscerality. The idea which Zarathustra preaches most fervently to mankind is that of the Superman, also known as the Ubermensch or Overman. Zarathustra expounds and extols the virtues of the Superman to all those who listen or are capable of listening, as well as many who do not listen and are not capable of listening to what he has to say. Those without the ears to hear, of whom, to Zarathustra's frustration, there are many. Quote, I teach you the Superman. Man is something that must be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? All creatures so far created something beyond themselves, and you want to be the ebb of this great flood and would even rather go back to animals than overcome human? Unquote. Here, Zarathustra, in the midst of a crowd, decries the slave morality of the people of the modern age due to their petty concerns that so anchor them to mundanity, and presents to them the idea of the Superman as an ideal to strive toward, for the sake of the betterment of mankind as a whole. To Zarathustra, the Superman is the greatest thing to aspire to, and he urges the townspeople toward their own betterment for the sake of continuing down the evolutionary path toward the further complexification of the phylogenetic unfoldment of biological incarnation untethered by baseness. Zarathustra compares how the ape is to man and how man is when he is considered as the forbearance of the Superman. Zarathustra seems to urge the biological evolution of mankind ever onward with his emphatic tirades. Quote, what is the ape to a human? A laughing stock or a painful embarrassment. And that is precisely what the human shall be to the Superman, a laughing stock or a painful embarrassment. You have made your way from worm to human, and much in you is still worm. Once you were apes, and even now a human is still more ape than any ape. Unquote. The idea of the Superman can be considered as an archetype which represents a potential future, further developed version of humankind, what people could eventually amount to if the constituent members of the species were honestly willing to lend themselves to the endless tasks of self-analysis, autopoiesis, meaning self-generation, and self-refinement, rather than giving in to the all-too-human predisposition toward falling into the habitual behavior patterns and anti-creative lazy thinking of habit, traditionalism, and the dehumanizing obsequiousness of moral judgment. Mankind is not the peak, but the path. Mankind is not the end state, but a means. Quote, man is a rope stretched between animal and overman, a rope over an abyss, unquote. The Superman is humanity's next stage in evolutionary progress, as proto-hominid was to the Homo sapiens, and can only be realized through a recognition of human imperfection, followed by the subsequent and endless challenge of the refinement and distillation of human being over time for the sake of the hopeful eventual suppression of all the imperfections of the present day, which can only be reached when humanity casts off all the vanity, arrogance, and pettiness that it so represents and has represented throughout history, and is so defined by. The Superman is joyful, creative, radically individual, and creates new values for himself through his own understanding and appraisal of reality, and does so affirmatively, without contempt or nastiness, apart from tradition, the collective, and the preordained ways of thinking and acting that Nietzsche so loathed. This book satirizes and mocks all forms of collectivism, herd mentality, and the slave morality which lies at the heart of its expression in its polemics against groupthink generally, and traditional institutions such as academia, like in the chapter The Academic Chairs of Virtue, Christianity, as alluded to, for example, in the section on the Preachers of Death, the state, what Zarathustra called the new idol, and of which he spoke thus, quote, everything about it is false. It even bites with stolen teeth, unquote. Cities are seen by Zarathustra as hives of nihilism and opportunism, for example, in the chapter on the flies at the marketplace. Traditional cultural practices more generally, as well as how people behave when they congregate in groups, as explored in chapters such as The Rabble, in which it is proclaimed that, quote, life is a font of pleasure, but where the rabble drink too, there all wells are poisoned, unquote. Thus spoke Zarathustra is a doctrine of affirmation and overcoming, which has as one of its main themes the eternal recurrence, an acknowledgement of the fractal nature of being itself, and how life is lived in cycles we seem destined to repeat over and over and over again. Zarathustra goes from periods of ascetic isolation and communion with nature in the mountains to recurring journeyings back to humanity and the herd in both the literal and figurative downgoing. The opening paragraphs of the book are a beautiful, elaborate metaphor comparing Zarathustra and creative man more generally to the sun. Quote, O great star, what would your happiness be if you did not have those for whom you shine? We wait for you every morning. Take from you thine overflow. and bless you for it. Therefore must I descend into the deep, as you do in the evening when you go behind the sea, and give light also to the underworld, thou exuberant star. Like you, I have to go down, as men say, to whom I shall descend. End quote. The directional tropes are strangely visceral and a theme used repeatedly in this book, with punchy little phrases like, not only onward shall you propagate yourselves, but upward, scattered throughout. The downgoing represents a condescension, by which I do not mean snarky behavior or being insulting, but a joining together at a lower place, which is what you get when you etymologically break down the elements of the word. Con, coming from Greek, meaning to go with, and descending, coming from Latin, literally meaning to move or pass from a higher to a lower place. Just think of any time you have to talk with any particularly low-minded character, a social justice warrior with no point, for example. You must lower yourself to their level to even begin to attempt to conduct anything approximating a meaningful interaction. So, for Zarathustra to speak to the herd, he must go down. By simplifying or humbling himself and composing himself to such an extent that he will be able to conduct himself rightly in order to be capable of effectively communicating with certain types of people. Quote, lo, I am a herald of the lightning, and a heavy drop out of the cloud. The lightning, however, is the Superman. End quote. The parables in this book are mind-blowing, and in this statement we once again see the figure of the descent of Zarathustra from his heights as being a forbearance of the coming of something spectacular, something illuminating, pure illumination itself. Downgoing is repeatedly used in both literal and figurative contexts, the coming down from great heights, but once again, it is clear that this is a metaphor for the descent from the great mental heights of one with master morality, who has spent years lost with reveries of thought in wilderness and solitude. Continuing in the vein of directional themes, there is the figure of overgoing. Quote, what is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. What can be loved in man is that he is an overgoing and a downgoing. Unquote. This represents the transcendence of previous limitations by rising above them, and is used paradoxically in conjunction with the figure of downgoing to express that sometimes in order to overcome or rise above challenging sets of circumstances, what is required is to descend to another place in order to deal with the problem more directly, as Zarathustra must lower himself from his great heights to be able to communicate with mankind. A going down for the sake of addressing otherwise unaddressed problems, so that they can be subsequently risen above in order to be overcome. It is similar to how I have been thinking about politics the past few months. One needs to involve themselves in this brutish, ugly, disingenuous contest of ideas to be able to affect change on a large scale. If you do not lower or humble yourself sufficiently, emotionally or intellectually, you probably won't want to take part. As politics Even political coverage these days is so full of mudslinging, divisiveness, and interprimate conflict that so defines the human world and politics specifically. But if you do not condescend into the sphere in which you can tackle political issues, how can one hope to overcome them? Are you interested in philosophy that is heavy on the metaphor, parable, and figures, wordplay more generally? If so, I would highly recommend this book. And for new readers of the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, I would recommend this book above all others. I will, in future episodes, be breaking down, performing readings, and analysing sections of this text. Please like, subscribe, hit that little bell thing, share my work, and donate if you appreciated this little production and would like to see more similar. Don't forget to comment below or message me to let me know what you think. I appreciate you watching. Good day, good morning, good eve, whatever time it is, and good luck to you.